Alrighty, here recording for, let me actually get this back to the beginning of this video, but recording for episode of Pod34 here. So I had thought originally that 32 was gonna be my continuation of Plato's Phaedo from 63D, but turned out I did an episode on Alex Bregman of the Red Sox, and then another episode that's not out yet on essentially this article about the Aaron Rodgers situation, the whole thing that Diana Rossini was reporting about them not wanting to go on Pat McAfee's show anymore, conditionality for him continuing to play, in a discussion of that. So kind of leave that lie where it is. My priority right now, honestly, even to get it out. So don't care as much about that. But then here at the beginning, just wanted to take a moment before I dive into Plato's Phaedo again to discuss quickly just yesterday in terms of a topic that seemed interesting is just the contrast between the NHL Four Nations tournament and whatever the hell the NBA All-Star Game is these days. And not to say that the NBA is struggling to do anything right, but, you know, their All-Star Game, All-Star Weekend isn't even entertaining anymore. I don't know who in their right mind would spend the time watching NBA players in these sort of formats. Like, who cares? I mean, the dunk contest hasn't been relevant since 2016, and prior to that it hadn't been relevant since like 2004 or whatever. So I mean, there's kind of an element of who the hell cares to a lot of this, where it's simply not the stuff that we used to think about when it's like Larry Bird walking into a locker room and telling people that are going to be competing with him in a three-point contest, tell them, I wonder which one of you bums is going to be finishing second. And clearly, with whatever the All-Star Game had been in the last several years, clearly wasn't up to par, wasn't something interesting enough that it was worth putting on television. Therefore, they had to change it. But suffice it to say, the changes they made, to use the word Mickey Mouse and stupid and who cares, and why, again, would anybody watch this or consider themselves entertained after having watched it. You know, you just see this sort of situation of desperation almost from the NBA, where they understand essentially that not only is their regular season no longer nearly as entertaining, but in addition to that, they can't even really generate much more than just kind of parody level interest in their All-Star Game, in the sense that nobody cares about the game. It's all talking about their various attempts to popularize themselves in the league. And again, whether this is the NBA in-season tournament or any of these other silly sort of ventures that you could seriously point to and say, what are we doing here? Who the frig cares about this shit? And who again is going to watch it? And then I, as somebody who, and I'm a Boston sports fan, but I'll throw my cards on the table, I'm not somebody who's going to watch many regular season hockey games, if any. I think that's a truism I can state about myself that's been true the entirety of my life. No offense to the Bruins, they've always been number 4 in the pecking order of the Boston sports teams, and have never really, they've never been higher than 4. Never, even when they were winning a championship and competing in 13 and 18 for cups, they will never rank as high as the Red Sox and also the Celtics and the Patriots, just because I guess growing up I was bigger fans of baseball and basketball for playing them, and then football for its popularity, and I played that as sort of two-hand touch or recess football sort of style. But hockey, it's almost like a separate sports universe where given sort of the high entry point of equipment and cost as far as how many people are actually going to end up playing hockey, especially, when it's not, pond hockey or something where it's a bit more customary to do so. But certainly not my experience that hockey is something that's readily available to everybody and easy for everybody to play. Not even just talking about skill sets of how hard it is to play the game, but just accessibility to the game itself. And then that's arguably part of why also it's a Canadian sport, but part of why the NHL is such a smaller league than the NBA, etc. And then you just have something like yesterday where it seems like the internet collectively decided, and I agree with them, that the NHL's Four Nations tournament, which, forgive me if I butcher the concept because I am only guessing, I don't know and frankly don't care about why the NHL season goes on pause for a few weeks while Canada, the US, Finland, and whoever the frig else sends their teams to play in this Four Nations tournament. So I'm just going to guess it's Four Nations, and they're playing in a tournament, and therefore, they're playing hockey where you've got, I've seen clips of Brad Marchand is on, Team Canada, obviously, and Brendan Carlo is on, or Charlie McAvoy, I think, is on Team USA, and blah, 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 blah. So, not to waste too much time on that, but quite clearly from yesterday, what you saw of the US-Canada game, US win 3-1, or whenever that was, and then I saw they played the gold medal game and scored 4-3, and exciting, etc. And I'll throw my cards on the table. I didn't watch any of this stuff because I was busy working on my own stuff the other day. But, if I was going to watch anything, especially knowing the result, but even just thinking about it, it's like, hey, Alex, do you want to watch something that's hockey and is going to be competitive, etc.? Or do you want to watch a bunch of basketball players waste your time? Like, well, certainly don't want my time wasted, and so I'm not going to watch the NBA players do whatever the hell this All-Star Game weekend nonsense is. And again, why it's so important to these sports, I think it's because there's a sort of remnant of what it used to mean to people. You hear about on like Pat McAfee's show talking about what it used to mean to go to the Pro Bowl, to like go to Hawaii, Honolulu, whatever it was, and the sort of status of it. And there are clips that will play all the time, like Sean Taylor hitting a punter on a fake punt sort of play in a Pro Bowl, although I would kind of point out, it's like, why don't you name the other Pro Bowl clip you've ever seen? Name two, basically. But it used to mean something to somebody, and if that person's not me, then maybe it's other people. And then with something like the Pro Bowl games, which prestigious and important and can't miss television though they are, I'm certainly never going to watch any bullshit like that. And however, a lot of people did, however many millions, and so that's more draw than you're going to get for even some playoff baseball games, blah, blah, blah. So obviously from a business perspective, there's a reason to have these all-star games. But if we take away the business for a second and we look at it as an entertainment product, then we would say, or I would say first of all, that baseball, at least previously, has the only all-star game worth a fuck, because the MLB All-Star Game is an actual baseball game. And shocking to know, but when the best baseball players in the world actually play baseball against each other in a way where, you have the all-star teams, 2 teams, American League and National League, you get selected based on which league you're in, what position you play, how well you've played over the course of that season, especially to that point. And then the result of that, you watch a clip like I was the other day of Pedro pitching in the 99 All-Star game, and you have, Barry Larkin leading off, and then you've got, who was it? Not Todd Walker. I'm messing up the Colorado Rock. Larry Walker and Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire and all these guys. And you watch that game, and Pedro is pitching, and he's throwing upper 90s with his fastball, and he's dotting pitches all over the place, etc. And he strikes out 5 of the first 6, and Ivan Rodriguez throws down for a strike him out, throw him out, double play, etc. to end the second inning. And then obviously Pedro's then out of the game at that point, because the game's not about a real game. Again, it's an exhibition, but it's an exhibition that's real baseball. You know what I'm saying? If you watch Pedro Martinez throwing, a 73 mile an hour fastball because he's chilling and doesn't want to hurt himself. Well, first of all, I think pitchers would tell you that throwing at half speed or whatever is probably just as likely to get them hurt as throwing regularly would. And then the other thing is just that baseball is not a sport where it's very compatible that you can play it at a half the speed. I mean, theoretically you can, it's just that it's fucking dangerous, and therefore nobody would play in the field knowing what they're doing and be straight up lollygagging, not it's I'm playing third base and I'm just gonna turn around for this pitch. It's no, you get a ball in the back of the head and you're not gonna wake up. Well, that doesn't work. You have to actually play the game of baseball in the All-Star game. And so then the combination of the players that are gathered, the organization of them in terms of seeing them 1-1-1-1-1, where it's not a typical baseball game where, you're watching the 2 best teams in the league, and, there goes Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton before he hurt both of his elbows and blah, blah, blah. But then you get farther down the lineup, and then you've got other guys who aren't of that caliber, and that's how baseball teams are constructed. But then you get to the All-Star game, and I think what's great about the MLB All-Star game, not to talk about something completely irrelevant for a second, but what's really great about the MLB All-Star game in particular is because of the pitching rotation, it's possible to get a fairly unique exhibition of who these starting level pitchers are when they get to pitch in sort of a more traditional relief style appearance where they only have to throw a limited number of pitches, and therefore they can throw harder and spend themselves in the time that they're on there. I think one I remember in particular was I think this was the mid to late 2000s, and it was the All-Star game, and I was watching Brad Penny pitch for the National League, and just watching this guy pump it in a 99 every single fucking pitch, and thinking to myself, he can't do that in the regular games, right? That's insanity. That he would hurt himself, clearly, but then you get to see something that's really not possible long term. There's no league where the dudes could take steroids and add all the stupid elements you want to put together, and then all of a sudden they're throwing 99 every pitch for 7+ innings or whatever. That's just not reality. So as long as we're playing baseball in reality, then the MLB All-Star game creates this alternative environment where it's all right, the pitcher's super on point. I just mentioned Brad Penny, who's not, the greatest pitcher of all time, but I do believe he was starting the All-Star game that time, so he's a very good pitcher. And if he wasn't, he was pitching in the All-Star game, so an All-Star level pitcher. And you get to see these different guys pitching like that, and I don't think that's maybe how you want to exhibit somebody like a Greg Maddux, for example. Although I'm sure he can acquit himself just fine in an All-Star game, but it's really an exhibition especially for flamethrowers. And then the other matter is on the offensive side, and fuck defense. Who cares talking about the defensive side? You can already imagine how good the defenses either are or could be based on them being all-star teams. Not that every all-star is a high-quality fielder necessarily, but, probably better than the average team if you look, but whatever. But then from the offensive perspective, what you would say is, every hitter is like a high level batter, and you're not going to get a ton of guys, maybe a catcher or a slick fielding second baseman or somebody. You're not going to get a lot of guys who aren't good hitters, and so therefore you've got the exhibition on both sides. You're going to get a good game. It used to count for something in terms of World Series home field advantage, which I'm fine that it doesn't have that consequence anymore, because that is a little arbitrary. It should be based on who had the better record, earn that. But still, I think that the MLB All-Star Game is a worthy watch. I think that exhibitions like the Home Run Derby, for example, are I think the Home Run Derby is probably the best potential sort of non-game version exhibition from any of these sports. Fuck the NBA skill competition. Who the hell wants to watch that? But the Home Run Derby, right? Obviously, home runs, dingers, bombs, that's what you want to see. So, I'm not the biggest format of them. Frankly, throwing for 4 minutes, I do think that the old-fashioned format of the Home Run Derby was the best, where you get 10 outs, and that really changes the dynamic. I don't love it that it's literally just stand up there and wallop as many baseballs as possible. It doesn't matter how many non-homers you hit. Like, there's basically no strategy to that. But having said that, even in its current form, I'd certainly say the Home Run Derby is entertaining, something that would be worth the watch. And then you compare that against something else that should be worth the watch. Let's get back on track here a little bit. The NBA Slam Dunk competition, that's a pretty iconic event. And I think you'd say that a lot of the history of the NBA, from Michael Jordan and Dominique Wilkins and Spud Webb and a lot of those guys from some of those initial competitions, where you can really recall and remember the, the dunks of whether it's Jordan taking off from the free throw line, or, just look at Jordan's shoes if you want to see an image of some of those dunks, and Spud Webb and some of these other things where, and I guess at the time they benefited from the competition being in its infancy, them not having seen all the possibilities of essentially the different kinds of dunks that can be completed, over time, when you start to realize, you can go through the legs, you can jump, go through the legs, you bounce it off the backboard, you can do all these silly things, and then you're, playing NBA Live 2005 or whatever, and you're recreating the dunk competition with Jason Richardson from the Golden State Warriors, and it's a lot of fun and it's entertaining. Nowadays, the NBA Slam Dunk competition is broken. Now, am I going to be the millionth person to point out that LeBron never did this competition, that a lot of other guys who could have done this competition, who would have done well in the competition, ended up not doing it for whatever reason? And even I heard LeBron say, he doesn't regret at all not doing the dunk contest, and I would certainly agree with him personally that he shouldn't regret it, because frankly, he doesn't fucking need that for the sake of his legacy or anything like that. But it probably would have been fun to see, although it's just the argument to be made, like, some of these guys who, they do these powerful dunks in the games, and so you think they might be a world-class dunk contest competition person, and then you realize, oh, wait a minute, they really don't have as many creative ideas as, a Jason Richardson or not a Tracy McGrady, but a Vince Carter. Not to speak ill of Tracy McGrady, I think he did that competition too, but there's a certain combination of skills that makes for you being a great dunker in that context. And I think Vince Carter is sort of the epitome of that. And then what I would say, though, is if you look at the more recent history, and you'd say when Zach LaVine and Aaron Gordon did their dunk contest, that was also iconic. And I'll throw the idea out there that it's just as iconic as any dunk contest of all time. But they weren't able to keep that momentum. Now, whether it's because that competition sort of wiped it all out, and then they didn't have that combination of people in there again, so it's like, oh, look at that, Zach LaVine just jumped from the free throw line and went through his legs. Well, goddamn, that's impressive. Anything else? But, this also goes to me not having watched this competition in years. I've grown to the point where I don't care, almost because from an internet perspective, you can look at it and say, every dunk that's going to be done that's worth the doing has already been done. Now, that is an incorrect statement. That's an opinion that I know lingers in my mind that I also know is not correct, in the sense that, not every single year, but regularly enough, people in this competition will come up with new ideas. I think Aaron Gordon and Zach LaVine alone are proof positive that you can take it to another level and generate the interest and the long-term legacy of imprint of those sort of dunks. But when you're talking about, and I don't want to be the bajillionth person who's brought this up, but if Mac McClung doesn't play in the NBA regularly, meaning he's not an NBA roster player, then it's not that he shouldn't be allowed to participate in this competition, but it's like, it's not in the spirit of, you could go on off and find the best dunkers in the world, and they're not all necessarily in the NBA. And so if that was what you were going for, we're like, hey man, it's a competition about dunking, bro. What do you not get about that? That's all they do in this competition. They dunk, and they dunk. Therefore, we want the best dunkers. But it's like, no, we want the best NBA dunkers. I'm not just looking for, the dude that the Celtics dress up in a leprechaun costume and send off the trampoline to dunk, in between timeouts and shit. I don't want to see anything like that. And even the dudes who are really talented, like, organize them something else. I don't want to see it. This is about the NBA's All-Star Weekend. It's a competition that's done at the weekend. Frankly, I think, now this is this is tougher, but maybe there's an argument you should have to be a damn all-star to participate in the competitions, but that's a little extreme, because then the three-point competition and the dunk competition wouldn't get filled in terms of roster spots as often, so that's not feasible. But again, it's supposed to be part of a larger weekend, which is supposed to be centered on the All-Star game. And so when you start telling me that, oh, look, Alex, we've got a new format, we've got a new All-Star game, why, it isn't one shitty game of basketball, it's 4 mediocre games of basketball. And it's like, wait a minute, why would that be better? Well, there's more teams, and they're mixing it up, and they're chosen differently, and it's not traditional, so you're not going to get bored. And it's like, yeah, but I wasn't going to watch anyway. And like I said, for the NHL thing, I didn't watch the Four Nations tournament thing anyway, but if I was going to spend my time and watch a broadcast version of any of these games right now, it would have been like the USA-Canada game from the Four Nations tournament, because that seems like it was competitive, they were fighting right off bat, atmosphere, etc. And nobody could tell those people, oh, you're playing, Disneyland hockey, Mickey Mouse hockey. That's not real hockey, that's blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, clearly they're going to be playing real hockey, because, again, hockey, I don't know if you could play it at half speed, but if you could, everybody could see it, and nobody would watch that. And, there's someone, I guess, who could say, well, nobody watches the NHL All-Star Game, and that's probably true. But it seems like they got a lot of attention on their Four Nations tournament thing the other day, and it certainly seems like they outcompeted the NBA, and it certainly seems like the NBA is sort of looking pathetic today, where, they had their All-Star whatever the fuck it is, who cares, and on the other hand, the NHL through this Four Nations tournament seems like they put on something that's worth the entertainment watch. You know what I'm saying? Like, have these people ever stopped and think, like, is this something you would actually watch on television? Would I watch a uber competitive hockey game between Canada and United States? Yes, I would. Of course I would. Now, would I watch it before doing some other things? No. But would I watch it in theory, and does that make me more likely that I would watch it? Yes. And so now I know going forward, if this Four Nations thing is on and it's on a certain service and I got that, then I'll, throw that on the background and watch that. But if somebody's going to tell me, hey bro, Team Dame is playing against Team JT in the All-Star game, and it's the first of 2 games of blah, 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 and they're playing a 30, and it's like, what? Like, I know that the NBA players basically ruined this game by screwing around, essentially, and you can really look at it, and this is judgmental, but I don't care. Like, it's probably like a straight up freaking fact at this point. I don't know, but like, when you're just out there lollygagging on the court and you're screwing around, first of all, nobody's going to take that seriously, and also it just engenders this attitude. It's like, we're here, and us being here is what we're here for. We're not here to compete. And it's like, okay, well, you're not there to compete, and frankly you don't want to get hurt, which is more than reasonable, but then you make a mockery out of it by not playing any defense, not being competitive. And it's just like, well, if I wanted to watch some coordinated dancing, I might go watch something like that. Why, I'm not here for that. Like, I'm here to watch a basketball game ostensibly between the best players in the world, where, maybe it'll be a more casual pickup game for the first 3 quarters, and then they'll lock in, get a little more serious at the end. But you're telling me that these guys are gunning for 200 fucking points, and they're playing to a score limit and all this. I mean, to say that step by step that the NBA players who, I have doubt that this is something that the NBA came up with completely on their own. And I think what they looked at it, they said the NBA players are entitled. And again, I'm saying entitled, that's a loaded term, but it's entitled in the sense that, like, they're entitled to be there, they've been selected, etc. Not only are they entitled to be, they're entitled to be there and to not care, and also to derive the revenue that comes from that game and all the surrounding events. And so, they kind of want it both ways, where they certainly want their money, but they also don't really want to put in any effort that's worth the money. So again, why would I pay any money for the NBA All-Star Game, All-Star Weekend? Go to Cancun, take a vacation. I don't give a shit. I'm not watching this, and I never will. And for people being like, well, I like watching the 3-point competition. Really? Okay, then. Why don't you go watch a regular season NBA game? It's basically a 3-point competition as it is. Like, what the hell do I need to watch somebody shoot a money ball basket full of all money balls for? Like, who cares? And if the slam dunk contest is, again, not worth the watching because, a dude who's not a regular NBA player has won it 3 times in a row or whatever, then it raises the question of who cares. And if Ja Morant and Giannis Antetokounmpo are going to participate in the dunk contest, then maybe that changes the calculus, but I really don't even think so. Maybe Ja Morant, frankly. I don't know necessarily what Giannis would do in that. I don't know, but he's a great athlete, so I'm not saying he can obviously dunk, but I think, you look at somebody like a Dwight Howard, who was a great slam dunk champion, you'd say, well, he was sort of built for a competition like that, and You know, but Giannis might do really well in that. That's actually, the more I think about it, the more I think it's basically based on how creative Giannis is with the dunking, because if he just gets up there and you realize that he's kind of dunking like a traditional 6'11" big man, it's like, I don't really want to see that. I want to see somebody kind of jump out the building, and like I said, Dwight Howard is what comes to mind when I think of that. So, but what I'm getting to here though is that I think we can all conclude that the NBA All-Star Game, just like the NBA in-season tournament, is not worth the while. I don't know who watched it or how many people watched it, but again, who cares? And then there's sort of desperate attempts for attention. We're changing the NBA All-Star Game. Okay. Why don't you just let the game fade into the background? Nobody cares about the game. Maybe people don't try in the game, less people watch the game. Does that really damage the NBA long term that much for you to cut off that vestigial tail and cast it aside because it's unnecessary? I mean, like I say, for the most sports, there's no need for this All-Star Game weekend sort of thing. And then if you're going to do it, clearly you should do it the way the NHL did it. And I don't frankly think it has to do with the world's, the country's thing. You just need some sort of organizational principle for how the players are organized. So I don't know what exactly that organizational principle would be. The first thing that came through my mind was the NBA divisions, and have them essentially play by divisions, not by conference, but the NBA Atlantic plays together and the Southeast plays together, and wherever the ones in the Western Conference are, because I don't remember the names of those, but that's just an idea, but probably not a great idea either, because then I don't know who would care, but although it might create interesting pairings, but that sounds stupid, honestly. But again, I think when you see that the internet seems pretty universal on the idea that entertainment was had during the NHL's Four Nations event, and then you look at the NBA guys, and I think Jaylen Brown is one of the guys who's basically like, yeah, I don't think there's going to be much effort in this game, and blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of, on one hand, it's keeping it a little too real. Like, hey, Jaylen, how about you pretend a little bit so people maybe care? But then on the other hand, I really do think it's like, don't pretend. Like, if you don't care, I much more appreciate that you've told me so that now I know I don't have to care. But then you turn it around and you say, well, that hurts the league long term, especially if this All-Star Game does become completely irrelevant. It loses them a little bit of money. I don't think it's, again, a big deal, but it's something to think about, but probably not to think about long enough to actually change the behavior. And that's the point. If the NBA All-Star Game is not going to be worth watching, then people should not watch. And if current NBA players, including Draymond Green, are saying that this format is stupid and they don't understand it and it doesn't make sense, and frankly it doesn't make sense, then it really just raises the question of who the hell cares, which again, like I said in my earlier pod on the NBA Cup, this in-season tournament, it's the exact same problem where this All-Star Game weekend is really another attempt by the NBA to sort of distract from the fact that about half or more of their season went by and nobody noticed. And not nobody noticed, but the ratings speak for themselves. The NBA is not pulling the amount of viewership that it was, and whether that's, like I said, it's childish to think that means immediately that revenue needs to go down because they signed their long-term media deal. But I just think that from an entertainment perspective, the NBA has done themselves absolutely no favors in the last several years. And I think they're frankly going to pay for the fact that they didn't smooth out the salary increases as they should have, starting from the year that Kevin Durant went to the Warriors, because the salary cap went up like $25 or $30 million in a single season, which basically created a max level cap slot for the Warriors to be able to slot him in addition to the affordability of Steph Curry and Draymond on the second contracts that they had signed, and Klay Thompson, etc. So that's just to say the NBA clearly has not done first of all, they've not done a good job of competitive balancing for the last several decades, because I mean, to say LeBron James going to the NBA Finals every single year was a problem for the NBA I don't think that's accurate, but I just don't think it's good for parity when a guy goes to the finals like 8 straight times out of one conference, and then you look at the fact that then with the Cavs and Warriors going up against each other a bunch of times, it's really only recently that the NBA has gotten back to any sort of regular sort of parity, and yeah, so it's just to note that the NBA regular season is becoming less and less pleasant to watch all the time. And I will throw my hat in on this one though, don't hate the players, hate the game, essentially. So don't hate the players for playing the game a certain way. Like, they have studied this, and their 3-point shooting ways are optimized for scoring according to the rules that exist right now and the dimensions of the court, etc. Just statistically speaking, they have discovered that these things are more effective when you shoot a higher number of threes, because again, it's 1.5 versus 1. It's so simple in terms of the math, and then what it does though is it turns off the viewership, because you can watch an NBA game and there's a degree of regularity with the game where you'll watch it and you'll say, oh, they're coming across half court. Oh, they did a dribble handoff. Oh, they're doing a pick and roll between two guys, and then, they're trying to basically drive and kick. And I don't want to echo just Kobe Bryant's accidental basketball point. Go listen to what he said about that then, because it was echoed, I think, by Draymond or somebody a few days ago. But just, you can go to these NBA games and realize no matter how much strategy is involved, what they've fundamentally discovered about the game is honestly relatively simple. It's that instead of just looking to score the ball, per se, which would orient you more towards, get to the basket, get closer, make it easier for yourself. It's like, no. If we understand the rules and we practice and we do this, and that, then we understand that traditional mid-range jump shot is not as effective for most players unless you're Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Therefore, take the shot that is better quality and make better quality decisions overall, such that you're optimized. I just received the ball, and what I'm going to do isn't completely random, but it's probabilistic based on what is probably the best thing for me to do given this situation and circumstances. I catch the ball, I triple threat, and then I start to dribble, and I want to make a decision within 1-2 dribbles as to what it is that I'm doing. So perhaps, I catch the ball and, I bounce it a couple times only to realize there's no real way for me to attack the defense from this position. And therefore I essentially, I dribble the ball over to my near fellow, and then I hand the ball off to them, set a screen, and then either roll away or roll to the basket, whatever you would want to do. And then, the calculations start again, where it's like, the next guy throws the ball to the guy in the corner, and he's wide open. And so he doesn't even hesitate. He's like, boom, shoot that 3-pointer, because it's the shortest shot of all the 3-pointers, 22 feet, boom, hit that. And then, we're off and running. So that's to say that I think the NBA regular season obviously has gotten boring, because you go to these games and it's basically just a math problem. It's who's going to make more threes, and you can tell who's going to win the game. Is not as important anymore of the rebounding battle and all these nuances of turnovers and what it used to be. Although those things are obviously still important because it's still fucking basketball. The ball still will come off the rim and you have to catch it. But, I just can't stand, though, this desperate attempt by the NBA. It's almost like they've forgotten themselves. They don't understand who they are, which is, one of the premier sports leagues in the world. And it just seems like they've forgotten that, in the sense that they feel the need to get people's attention. Hey guys, we fixed the All-Star game so it's not completely fucking boring and you won't click off of it after 15 minutes. Yeah, please stay. We're kind of embarrassed by what the peak viewership is versus what the average viewership is, etc. If you could just hang around, we'd really appreciate it if you would, help us out. It's like, I didn't know the NBA was so desperate that you all had to interrupt the middle of your season and not to rant about the NBA Cup again, but interrupt your season in the middle of your season with stuff that's still part of the season, but sort of not part of the season. And it's a tournament, but it's not a tournament, and somebody wins, but who the hell cares? And can't I even remember who won the NBA Cup this year? No, I can't. And who fucking cares? And again, an irrelevant tournament about an irrelevant sports, like irrelevant fucking regular season. It's just like, who cares? You guys know that your bread and butter is the playoffs, and you better understand that. And if you were smart, what you would do is you would limit the supply of your games by having fewer of them, so your regular season games would become more important. But until you do that, I don't want to hear any NBA fan or NBA player crying about lack of interest or what happened to the fans. It's like, just like I said with the Jaylen Brown thing earlier, they did this themselves. If they wanted people interested in the All-Star game, they would have invested time and energy into it. They haven't. Therefore, nobody cares. And that's just the consequence of treating something like it's trivial. And then that prompts an interesting thought, which is that, the NBA All-Star Game, therefore, has always been trivial in some sense. The only lack of triviality comes from the genuineness and the authenticity of the competition of the players playing. Michael Jordan, for example, you think he wanted to play in an All-Star Game and get out-alphaed by whoever? Of course not. So that's just to throw that out there, that's like a different era. And this is not picking on Jaylen Brown at all, but quite clearly he doesn't have any time or patience for the All-Star Game. And in a strictly pragmatic sense, I completely understand where he's coming from. But then, in a certain sense, he should beg out of the competition, say, I don't want to be involved. But clearly he's not going to do that because the status of being an all-star, the contract implications, etc. He won't do that. But it's like, you know what? How about everybody in the All-Star game appreciates playing in the game and wants to play hard? And if you don't want to play hard, how about you don't participate? Take your All-Star selection and go. But that's not the situation. And so these people show up for this tokenized sort of event as if we're supposed to care. And I'm just trying to point out that just assuming that people should care just because you're the NBA, it's our All-Star game, good for you. Your All-Star game's not what it used to be. Tell me what you've been doing lately. And that does make it a what have you done for me lately sort of thing, but it's real. Like, you guys haven't done shit for me lately, so why would I watch any of that? And I went way longer on this than I thought I would, because I was going to start on Plato's Phaedo at the beginning of this, and I realized that I'm going to make that into Pod 35, I guess. But just wanted to quickly talk about that, because you see all the clips from the Four Nations thing, and not to just revel in fighting, but this is why part of why hockey is awesome. It's just that there's regularized fighting. You don't see that many places in open society. And then, the fact is they played a hockey game after that. It was likely chippy, competitive, etc. And that's the sort of thing that you want to watch for an entertainment event. Not a bunch of rich people getting onto their private playground in order to jog around and have a have an easy time. Nobody's going to watch that. And anybody who's trying to promote an event like that should have a little self-awareness. Look at the content, and frankly be ashamed, because you're wasting people's time. But I think that's more than enough, because I even saw earlier today, it was Big Cat from Barstool Sports, and he was talking to Ryan Russillo, who I'm a big Russillo fan and listened to his pod and him and the Ringer and yada yada yada. But Big Cat asked him if the NBA was in trouble, and he started to go into his talking points about essentially why they're not in trouble and why he doesn't want to overreact. And first thing he mentioned is like, oh, it was against an election campaign and all this. I'm like, okay, like, I think we can just acknowledge that the NBA's ratings being down by 30% are likely not all due to the fucking election. And then, the broader point that he's really relying on is just the fact that, again, the NBA already has their blank check from the media companies as far as their media rights deal, and it being as, frankly, outrageously high as it is, it's a blank check in the sense that ratings are not going up, yet they're getting paid for it. And so there's not a one-to-one correlation between their current ratings and what's going to happen in this current CBA, but then going forward there would probably be differences along those lines. And so but Big Cat, what he asked Brian Russillo, he said, is the NBA in trouble? And I think Russillo's point is no. And my point to Russillo is like, yeah, that's because that's like your second main sport after football. And it seems pretty clear that you like basketball more than football. So it's really your main sport. You like the drafting, all this stuff. So of course you're invested, but look at me. And I'm talking about myself as if anecdotally my own experience and opinions bear on anybody other than myself. Maybe they don't. But for myself, like, especially because I grew up in a house without cable for a long time, the idea of watching the Celtics, I didn't have to watch them to follow them, and I didn't. And so that's created a pattern for me where I follow most of my sports teams without watching the regular season games, because the watching of it has always been a higher entry point in terms of price than either I was able or willing to pay. And even now, like, I'm not going to pay for an SN Plus subscription or an SN 360, whatever it is, just to watch every Red Sox game. Like, if I was infinitely wealthy, yes, I'd pay for that. But right now, I'm not going to pay for that because that's not worth the money. And I would assume they're overcharging for it, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, but, yeah, that's to get a little afield. But, when Big Cat talks to Russillo and says, is the NBA in trouble, I would say they're in a little bit of trouble, because trouble is relative. When you have a $10 billion blank check, you can laugh at the ratings going down, but I guarantee you won't be laughing if there's multiple years of the ratings going down. So unless this is a blip, that means you can't just be so flip about it. And I remember hearing it on Pat McAfee's show relatively recently. He was kind of speculating with the people on the show. He was kind of like, I think, because we were talking about the Super Bowl ratings and what they estimated that they were going to be. And their point was, well, the NBA ratings are up and to the right. Pretty much everything else is sort of in decline. I mean, you might look at baseball or something and say it's up from a few years ago, and then say, what's that compared to the peak period? Even the NBA is not really drawing the audiences that it was when Jordan was in the NBA. And frankly, the NBA has been coasting off the legacy of Michael Jordan since the late 1980s, in the sense that Jordan elevated the league even after Bird and Magic did. But he elevated the league to such a level that for, 15 years, the ratings were consistently lower in terms of NBA Finals watched and all these other things, and the scoring was always also down, and so they basically eliminated hand checking in order to fix that, and who knows if that's fixed that. But again, you look at the most watched basketball games of all time. I'll get on the computer and look that up real quick, but I'm pretty sure if I look that up, the two games that are going to be the number 1 and 2 or number 1 for NBA and number 1 for college basketball is probably going to be the 1979 NCAA championship between Bird and Magic, and Game 6 of the 1998 NBA Finals with Michael Jordan. Now, I might be mistaking when the peak period was for Jordan NBA, but I do know that the NBA Finals ratings have not been nearly the same. Most watched basketball game. Get to that in a second. And then I really do need to get on to Play-Doh because I haven't done any work on this weekend, so I wanted to do more. But I think I've kind of gone through my points and beaten them to a pulp enough that you can understand why I'm having a bit of a hard time taking seriously the NBA right now, because, again, I'm a Celtics fan, but, even Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, once I know they're playing in a game that doesn't matter, i.e. the NBA All-Star game, then there's no need and no point in watching that. It's just... Yeah, so most watched games in NBA history. I'm not even on a website yet, but I'm just seeing from a preview that Game 6 of the 98 Finals is the most watched game in NBA history. Averaged 18.7, so a 33 share. Yeah, so it's just to say that the ratings for the NBA maybe aren't determinative to... that's business too, that it's not always as simple as 1 + 1 ends up equaling 2. A lot of times in business, for some strange reason, 1 + 1 equals 3 because of interest or some silly shit like that. So, highest rated, most watched NBA Finals series, 1998 NBA Finals between Chicago Bulls and Utah Jazz, averaged an 18.7 rating, 33 share, 29.04 million viewers on NBC. Series also featured the highest rated, most watched NBA Finals game, Sunday night, averaging a 22.3, 38 share, 35.89 million viewers. 1987 Finals between the Celtics and Lakers was the highest rated and most watched NBA Finals series on CBS. So that's again there's CBS and NBC, and clearly those are two of the major national broadcasters, so they're able to reach a large audience share. And so their highest 1987, 24.12 million. So you figure from there to 11 years later, 35.89 million. And then let's go 2015 NBA Finals on ABC. So then we got ABC, NBC, CBS. Average 11.6 rating, 21 share, 19.94 million viewers. So again, that's very impressive, but you can also look at that and say, not only is that down from the end of Jordan's time, but even maybe relative to a more competitive TV environment where there's more shows and therefore you're going to get less of a share anyway. It's just the raw numbers are lower, the share numbers are lower, everything is lower. And so they got 31.02 million viewers for Game 7 of the 16 Finals. And again, they got a Game 7 in that series, not a Game 6 as in 1998. 2019 Finals had a drop in American viewership, citing presence of an American team, Canadian viewership does not count towards U.S. Nielsen ratings. So it's possible that the ratings are actually higher on a global scale, and that's part of what's making these things be misconstrued to some extent. Jeez. I'm just looking at some of the least watched and rated NBA Finals games, and they're all from the Lakers bubble tournament in 2020, which again wasn't the NBA Cup. They actually played in a real NBA playoffs that time. It wasn't a fake tournament. It was a real tournament to cap off a season that had been cut off in the middle, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not going to join in on the people saying that's a fake championship for the Lakers. Yeah, your goddamn mind. Those people were at fucking Disney World playing basketball, and I'm going to stop talking about it now, but clearly they've struggled because of. So, I mean, geez, let's look at this. So, basically, if you look at it, so let's look from 2008. So let's start with the second most recent Celtics-Lakers series. So you get a 6-game series. You get 14.94 million viewers. You get 17.39 for Game 6. So basically you need things to get to a Game 7. Like happened 2010, 28.2 million viewers for Game 7. So that goes even more to prove that the NBA really should have every fucking incentive to make sure there's actual parity. So hilarious situations like LeBron getting to the finals a bunch of times only to lose 4-0 or 4-1 are just terrible for viewership overall, but whatever. But then to get to a more recent period, so you've got so you've got sort of a peak in 2016, 2017 obviously. You only have a 5-game series and a 4-game series the next year, so viewership down. Then 2019 things are down, 2020 things are big time down, and then you've basically just got no recovery. Like, my goodness, those numbers are fucking lower. So much. They're basically half as low as they used to be. Bottom line. So, again, to get off that a little bit, but I've been saying that, the NBA's season is the postseason, and the NBA Finals seems like it's not been sort of pulling its weight in recent decades, whatever, but that's going a little afield towards the end here, and I'm at an hour already, so I'll pause right about now. But just wanted to quickly talk about this because I just don't think we should let these big businesses that frankly can get away with it if we let them. We should raise our voices and say, hey, not only am I not going to watch this, I'm also going to make fun of you for doing it. Like, you look silly trying to convince people to care about this, and because you look that way, I'm going to comment on it. And maybe that doesn't, clearly probably won't change the behavior in the sense that, now they're going to do what I say, and they're going to play a real NBA All-Star game, and they're really going to try, and Jaylen Brown is going to be apologetic about the opinion he's had or attitude he's had towards the NBA All-Star game. It's like, I don't expect that at all. But if they're interested in looking at things from a logical perspective, I would invite them to listen to the perspectives of the many, many people who've been saying that the NHL far outclassed the NBA over the last few days, because clearly they did. So, that's it. Just wanted to get that going, but now it's time to get back to Play-Doh. All right, thanks.